How well does history repeat itself? This is the Bitcoin long-term chart starting in July of 2010, where Bitcoin was just a few cents, all the way to today. And the two lines you see over here are simply just curved lines that I've marginally drawn. You can draw them however you want. It's not any kind of regression chart or something like this, but I basically try to connect these tops over here as well as the bottoms. So this is by no means a perfect approach, but it gives us some kind of a range where Bitcoin, at least historically, was moving. Now, how well did history repeat itself? Are we going to see similar crashes as we have seen in the past? Let's look at two main crashes. Let's first of all look at the Mt. Gox Silk Road implosion, where Bitcoin went down from above $1,000 all the way to $180 again. And let's compare this with the crash that happened after the ICO boom in 2018, the crypto winter, with then the final minor capitulation over here. And let's then compare this to our current bear market, where we are, by the way, now pretty low to this historically well-defined support line. But how much have we so far fallen, and how well did history repeat itself in the past? So let's look at this crash over here, the Mt. Gox Silk Road crash. Let's look at how well this actually replicated in 2018. So let's overlay this. Let's overlay this here with the top. And what we can see is that the pace of the crash wasn't all that different. It took pretty much the same time to reach similar lows in Bitcoin. And when we look at how much in terms of percent did actually Bitcoin fall, it's not that massively different, right? In the Mt. Gox Silk Road crash, we maybe went down by an additional 6% or so, but really, I think we can pretty much call this history having repeated itself to a certain degree, right? The magnitudes are quite similar. And it does look like the recovery took a bit longer, right? This is more like a U-shaped recovery, whereas in 2018, we almost went up in a V-shape. But at least during the initial times of the crash, it wasn't that different. Now, when we take this exact same Mt. Gox Silk Road crash and we overlay this to today, how does this look like? So again, let's take the top over here. Let's also take the intraday movements, align this pretty closely. What we now notice is, again, the pace of the collapse isn't that different. Pretty much meet similar price levels at similar points in time. What's interesting though, this time around now, is that if we are going to replicate what happened in 2014, we are likely going to exit this support, the historical support that we have seen in the past, which at some point has to happen because these lines, they don't have the same slope, they don't have the same curvature, so they would be crossing in the future if we just continue drawing them out. Now, let's change the color of this, maybe to red. And let's now take the 2018 crash, the crash that happened after the ICO boom. And let's overlay this to today. So again, take the top as a reference and see where this brings us. And since the magnitude from top to bottom in both of those crashes isn't that different, right? 85% over here and maybe 84 over here, roughly the same. We can also see that the corresponding lows are not different in any way. We do see though that the recovery in 2018 happened faster, right? This was the absolute low in 2018. This was the absolute low in 2014. Now, where would this bring us in today's prices? So again, an 85% drop roughly. If things repeat itself, we would be bottoming out somewhere around 11K, maybe 10.6K. I find this pretty fascinating. I find it fascinating that the pace at which Bitcoin goes down during a bear market isn't all that different, even though the market cap of Bitcoin has changed quite a bit. The very first rally, the one that happened in 2011 with the subsequent crash in the same year, this of course was way faster. And this was only when Bitcoin was less than $10. But since then, even though we did go up more than an order of magnitude, there isn't that much slowdown, at least in terms of the bear markets. So this is simply just one exercise among many. Nobody can call the top. So this is by no means a video trying to say that we have to go down to these levels and then only buy at 11K and hope for the ultimate recovery that could then potentially bring us a 10x or so. These bear markets, they somewhat resemble, but they are not exactly the same, right? This is still roughly 2 months of a difference. The bottom was, the recovery was very different. It took way longer in 2014 than in 2018. And we also have to note that these low prices here, they only happened very briefly. You really would need to buy at exactly the right week at least in order to lock in these prices. It's way more likely, especially when you dollar cost average, that you're getting some price here that's around the low, but that's not exactly at the low, right? So you would be buying somewhere here, which isn't that far away from our current price. It's maybe another 10% down or so. The ultimate question is, do you think that crypto, or in this case Bitcoin, will survive? Will it completely die and will it be forgotten 5 years from now? Or are people actually eventually going to allocate again when momentum is more bullish again? If you think that there is a good chance that all of this will survive, then the potential risk to reward is of course quite massive now. It's a bet with a pretty high expected value. It's one where the implied return on investment over the next years isn't bad at all, but it's of course also not risk-free. If all of this fallout in the end means that regulation will get so tough that Bitcoin and crypto in general becomes unattractive, then maybe it will never recover. But no investment is without risk, and the reason why the prices are low now is because a lot of people have given up hope. And that's then the chance. You want to move against the general sentiment. You want to be selling when everybody is calling the 100K Bitcoin, and you want to be buying when everybody is calling a 5K Bitcoin or a death of Bitcoin altogether. It's interesting that these long-term trends are likely going to get somewhat broken. We've also seen this in logarithmic regression charts, in, say, the Bitcoin rainbow chart, or in other more scientifically calculated trend charts. We do see how these anticipated growth curves kind of break down now. But I personally believe that still at some point there will be a floor. There's always going to be, in my opinion, the demand for an asset that's not being controlled massively by the government. If you hold property, you can get taxed away. If you hold stocks, your portfolio might get confiscated as well. If you hold Bitcoin, you can simply just cross borders, move to a country that's more friendly, and use your wealth however you like. But of course, there is volatility, and that's kind of like the downside, so to speak. Any upside has to also be paid with volatility, with potential risk. And buying in now for these current 16K is obviously not without risk. The minimum that we have to potentially anticipate is another 30% drop. That's very much within what history has shown us Bitcoin is capable of doing. But after all of this fallout from the FTX collapse is over, when all of this calms down again and people aren't really taking that much notice of the price action, there's not much attention on the asset class, that's then where you should pay attention, in my opinion, and where it does make sense to put in those heavy bets. And I always bought in the past and it hurt the most and it was the most nerve-wracking to buy, that was actually the best time. It was during the Corona crash when everybody was freaking out. It was also after the minor capitulation. I simply just bought against the general sentiment, and that then played out as one of the bets with the best overall return and profit. So that's where we are currently at. Probably not yet the bottom, but potentially the bottom. So I'm just DCAing in and I increase my dollar cost averaging size, my regular buying size, the lower we go. And I do expect that we are not going to fall much lower than 10K unless there's really a major change in regulation. If that doesn't happen, then 10K is probably relatively solid. But nobody can be sure that we're actually going to reach these levels. And at the current price, the risk versus reward over a longer period, of a longer time frame, is not bad at all. So it does make sense to continue to deploy at least some capital. No financial advice, but simply what I'm personally doing. I'm also discussing the current situation with the premium members regularly. So there's like 4 to 5 videos on crypto, on the current bets that I'm taking every single week. So feel free to check that out. There's also a free Telegram group. Simply search for Bitcoin Strategy Channel within the Telegram app. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video. Bye bye.